My name is Dr. Ernst B. Johnson. Today, I'm here to honor my teacher, Ustaz Mahmoud Mohamed Taha. The reason I chose to go to Sudan was because I was very impressed with how Salman and the other Sudanese students I met at the University of Hawaii carried themselves. I asked Salman at one point, are there any teachers in the Sudan who have a modern understanding of Islam? And he stopped for a moment and then said, there's one. He said, I've read all his books. I believe everything that he has written, and he exists in the Sudan. When I first arrived at Ustaz's house, I was a bit in shock because it was so humble. I had expected a man as great as him to be living in some other type of structure. But he lived in a mud-walled, typical home in Umdurman, Sudan. When I entered into the living room, they call it the saloon, I found that there were a number of people seated along the walls and on the floors. Mainly men sitting on the floors, young men, and women, and some older men sitting in chairs along the wall. My first impression was that these young men are sitting, many of whom were older than me, were sitting there in anticipation of something. They were sitting holding their knees, and they were sitting almost in reverence. And I wondered if it had something to do with the teacher I was coming to meet. And then he entered the room, and I realized immediately that it did. My sense at the time was this beautiful man dressed in white robes with a white beanie or tagia on his head flowed into the room, took his seat, smiled, acknowledged everyone in the room. I was given a seat right next to him as a guest. And after he finished his introductory statements to people and greeted people in the room, he turned to me and he said, Abdullah, which was the name I was using. He said, what would cause a Christian to become a Muslim and then to travel all the way to Sudan in search of Islam? And the question was so direct and so important in terms of my presence at that moment in that place that I was startled for a moment by it. And what I said to him was that I had been searching. And though I was born a Christian, I was baptized again at 16. And I studied world religions while I was in Hawaii. And I practiced Eastern religions. I practiced Tai Chi. I studied Hinduism. I practiced yoga. And I still was searching. And I heard that you might have some ideas that would answer some of my questions. And he said, that's good. And so we finished with our meeting, and we said our goodbyes because some of his pupils were returning from their evening work. What they did was travel into the Tri-Cities of Khartoum, Khartoum North, and Umdurman, and have corner discussions with people in the city about various topics ranging from politics to religion to the status of women in society, things that were pertinent to people at the time. And his students were returning. And as I walked out in the street to get back into Merani's car, 2 buses passed us. And I heard the people on the buses before they arrived in front of his house. And what I heard was chanting, and I couldn't make it out until they got right in front of me, and I realized that they were saying the name of God over and over. Allah, Allah. And I stared into the buses, and I was hit with white light, because almost everybody, certainly all of the women, and many of the men were dressed in white. And I asked Salman at that time, are these his students? And he said, yes, they are. And I said then, he's the man I want to study with. Well, at that time, Ustaz Mahmoud gave me a couple of the books that had been translated into English to read, to see what I thought of them. I read them. I returned within a week to his home, and he asked me what did I think of the books. And I said to him very directly, I think you're the truth I've been looking for. And he said, oh, well, you couldn't know that for certain. He said the only way you could be certain of that is if you lived with us long enough to see if we practiced what we preached. And I said, well, my bags are at the door. And that was in probably early September 1977. And I was taken to Brother's House A, which was only about 3 blocks from Ustaz Mahmoud's house. And I stayed in that house until it was confiscated by the security police in 1984, December of 84. So being in such close proximity to Ustaz Mahmoud gave me a discerned advantage in getting to know him. I was able to participate in all the activities that we had, and our activities were constant and actually tiring. Why I stayed in Sudan so long, it had everything to do with Ustaz Mahmoud's character and also his teachings. What I was most impressed with in his teachings were that I had come to the conclusion that as a Christian, Islam was relevant to me. And my understanding of that came from, or that conclusion came from, believing that Christianity and Islam were somehow related. In the sense that I believed that the God of Jesus and the God of Muhammad, peace be upon them both, were the same God. That they were both sent by the same God. And since Islam was the more recent revelation, then as a Christian who was searching, I believed that I could be informed by studying Islam. Ustaz Mahmoud's ideas became attracted to me because his understanding of Islam is derived from Islam itself. They are not intellectual ideas that come, say, from Western philosophy that are being, or Eastern philosophy that are being applied to Islam to try to fit Islam into the modern context. They are a reinterpretation of the very fundamentals of Islam, articulated in what he calls the second message of Islam, which is based upon his adherence to the practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, reinterpreted. But that adherence gave him the insight that he has into the religion of Islam itself. So for that reason, I was quite attracted to his ideas, because it seems to me that if there is going to be relevance for Islam in the 21st century, it is not going to come from the myriad of scholars who are trying to reinterpret Islam to fit the 21st century. It is more likely to come from a reinterpretation of the essential message of Islam and deriving that understanding from Islamic sources. And so that aspect of Ustaz Mahmoud was tremendously important. So what I mean by that is, Ustaz Mahmoud makes the distinction between Islamic law and the religion of Islam. It's a simple statement, but it's a fundamental critique of the religion. Many Islamic scholars do not separate Islamic law from the religion itself. Ustaz Mahmoud asks us to reflect upon the time in the 7th century when Islam was revealed on the Arabian Peninsula, to the status of people at that time, and to try to think about how it would be possible that a code of behavior that was revealed to solve the problems of the 7th century would still be applicable in the 21st century. He gave an analogy. The analogy, he said, is if you tailored a perfect outfit for a 7-year-old child, and that child then grows up to be 21 years old, and now you want that child to fit into that same outfit. He said there's nothing wrong with the outfit, but there's something wrong with a person who suggests that the child should fit into the outfit. Because when we think about the systems that exist right now and how many of them are broken, we have to think about what social systems can we put in place that are going to provide for the needs of people during the 21st century. Ustaz Mahmoud has focuses on democracy. And he says, though the word democracy is not reached in the Quran, democracy is a religious political system in the sense that it's moral, in the sense that it respects the dignity of every human being. And so he talks about the need for a democracy that is unencumbered by capitalism, which leads us to socialism. He then goes on to say that the worship practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, his private worship practice in particular, is a psychotherapeutic methodology that can allow human beings to solve their problems. And he said the base of monotheistic religion, which comes from Abraham, the base of it is Judaism. He said, and then from Judaism on the base, we move up with Christianity to the apex. He said Islam is the middle ground between the two, which connects them. And what connects them is the methodology that the Holy Prophet Muhammad brought, which can allow human beings to reach a place where they can turn the other cheek when they're struck, where they can love people who despitefully use you. And so in my mind, he integrated Christianity and Islam in that one moment and talked about Islam not as a religious faith, but as a comprehensive ideology with a personal methodology that could allow human beings to actually clean their minds, calm their hearts, and practice what they preached. What impressed me about Ustaz Mahmoud is that he was consistently the same person. Always calm, always collected, immaculate, and very conscious of his surroundings and conscious of the needs of others. And this moves to his compassion. He personified it. So in many ways, I came to understand that Ustaz Mahmoud was exhibiting many of the characteristics that he said can be achieved through dedicating oneself to the personal practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. That when Ustaz Mahmoud went to his death, he did so by stepping out of his shoes, cleaning one foot, stepping onto the other shoe, and cleaning that foot of any sand that might be on his foot. And this is the way in which you go into the mosque. And this is how Ustaz Mahmoud went to his death. And so what I'm going to end with here is that this unique man who truly practiced what he preached and who has a unique interpretation of Islam, which can revive the religion from its basic principles and make it applicable to the 21st century because of the fact that it's reinterpreting the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet Muhammad as a psychotherapeutic methodology to allow human beings to become more compassionate and conscious. That man with that ideology is the epitome, I think, of human beings. And he's Sudani Tamam. Thank you very much.